I'm not going to tell you that you should read this book. This isn't going to be a deep dive analysis on the book or explain to you how to go about reading the book. I'm not going to tell you that if you think it's overrated or you don't understand the hype, that you're just not smart enough to get it or that it's a you problem. Instead, I'm going to tell you the reasons why I think this is a great book and then maybe help you decide if it's for you to read or not. The book I'm talking about is, of course, Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. Now, this is not only an extremely long book, it's like 11 or 1,200 pages. And of course, there's books with more pages than that, but the sheer volume of words in this book is staggering. It's estimated at over 500,000 words. I mean, the audiobook is like 65 hours or something crazy like that. But it's also one of the most controversial books, and it's coming up on its 30-year anniversary, originally published in 1996. And I read it last year, and I thought this would be a good time to talk about why I think this book is so special. And even though I probably wouldn't put it in my personal top 5 as far as my favorite books, I do have a tremendous amount of respect for this book. And I think that it gets a bad rap because even 30 years on, so many people speak negatively about Infinite Jest. They say that the only people who read it are performative readers or lit bros, and nobody actually likes it. They just say that they like it to seem intellectual, or that nobody even reads it. They just carry it around to look smart or put it on their shelf as a conversation starter when people come over. I don't think any of those things are true. I know lots of people who have read this book, and I know that they've read it because I've read it and have had very in-depth and meaningful conversations with them about the book. So let's talk about what makes this book great. I would say first and foremost, what I really think makes this book great is despite its complexity, despite its gigantic cast of characters and its gigantic scope and its 500,000 words, it is a relatively readable book in the sense that, and this is to quote Dave Eggers, who did the introduction for it in 2006, it does not require any special knowledge on the part of the reader. David Foster Wallace does not punish you for going into reading this text without having some type of esoteric knowledge about any particular topic. Now, this book touches on a ton of themes like tennis, filmmaking, drugs, the New England area, a little bit of Canadian history, but you don't necessarily need to know anything about those topics to read this book, because really the important stuff is either explained to you, or if there's things that you don't know, it's not super consequential to the plot, the themes, or the overall story. If you have the patience and the perseverance to read a 500,000 word book, then you can read it without needing to sit with a dictionary by your side or Google at the ready. Even a book like Melville's Moby Dick, there's so many biblical allusions and allusions to Shakespeare that you can gloss over all that stuff when you read it, but you're probably going to miss out on a lot of the text. I don't really feel like that's the case with Infinite Jest. You can just pick it up and read it without having to do any work ahead of time. The second thing that I think makes Infinite Jest so great is that it's a deeply human book in the sense that it touches on a theme that we've all had to deal with either directly or indirectly in our personal lives, and that is addiction. And I don't mean drug addiction specifically, although there is a lot of that in this book, but it also talks about sex addiction, gambling addiction, food addiction, and it also questions where that line is between a healthy obsession and an addiction. And when you read Infinite Jest, you get the sense that David Foster Wallace really knew what he was talking about when it comes to this topic, because he's lived through it himself. But also he has a great way of articulating what the experience of addiction is like in a way that you subconsciously probably always knew was there, but you've really never seen anyone vocalize it in the way that he does. So again, comparing this to the titan of postmodern literature, Like a Gravity's Rainbow, which is about World War II and the V-2 rocket, I mean, most of us really have no idea what that's like. It's a topic that we probably don't have that much firsthand or secondhand experience with, where this is a much more humanized book. It's much more about the human experience rather than some esoteric type of topic. The third reason, and what I think is the most compelling reason why this was such a great book, is how accurately David Foster Wallace predicted the future, particularly when it comes to politics and technology in Infinite Jest. And I don't want to give too much away, but there are going to be some minor spoilers here, but this isn't really the type of book you can spoil because it is just so much about the reading experience and the writing itself. But in the book, there is a technology that is so addictive for people to engage with. They engage with it over and over and over and over again until they basically just die. And if that doesn't sound like a satirized version of doom scrolling and TikTok, I don't know what is. I mean, probably most of the people watching this video have experienced falling into that black hole at least once where you think, you know, I'm just going to look at social media for 10 minutes and then I'll head on up to bed. 2 hours later, you're like, what the hell happened? Oh my God, I'm going to be exhausted tomorrow. I've stayed up way too late. That time just went by in the blink of an eye. I mean, that is what's described in this book effectively. Not only that, but there's also a really funny bit in the book where they're describing the technology of video conference calls. And this was written in 1996. So this technology kind of existed, but it wasn't in regular use. It wasn't like Zoom or FaceTime is today. And David Foster Wallace in the book talks about how people aren't going to like the way that they look on camera. So they're going to use this elaborate system of like masks or like fake versions of themselves to put on camera to make themselves look better or younger or thinner, or have better hair or whatever. That's filters. That's AI. On the politics side of this clairvoyance, we have the theme in the book where there's this weird combination of Canada and New England and the northern border of the US kind of getting blended, and it's become this wasteland. I mean, earlier this year, we had Donald Trump talking about Canada becoming the 51st state. Now, you could make the argument that 1996 wasn't that long ago, that it wasn't that hard for someone to kind of see these things happening. But to be honest, there was such a leap in the technology from when this book was written to the early 2000s, and really like modern social media only became what it is around like 2012, even 2015, 2016, I think is when Instagram started with stories. So this stuff accelerated really quick. And so it might not be that long ago that this book was written, but the technology wasn't really on track to be anywhere near where it is today. When David Foster Wallace wrote this book, I mean, there was just a huge acceleration in the technology from 2000 onward. Now, another reason why this book is just so freaking great is how complex and intricate it is in such a unique way. When you start reading this book, for the first 100 to maybe even 200 pages, you will be thinking, what the f*** am I reading? You're introduced to a lot of characters in the first few hundred pages. A lot of them seem to have absolutely nothing to do with one another. The tone of the writing is different from chapter to chapter. The dialogue is extremely different because it's very real. The characters have very distinct voices, in my opinion. But David Foster Wallace wrote Infinite Jest as what's known as a Sierpinski gasket, which is basically a bunch of little pieces or triangles, I guess. This is a little over my head, that all kind of fit together to form a much larger piece or puzzle or triangle. I did not know that going into reading this book, and it's something I only found out after the fact, but it made a whole lot of sense because I really think of this book as a collection of short stories that all are somewhat related to one another, and some of them connect very directly, and some of them are a little bit more adjacent, I guess is a good way to put it. Once I kind of got the feeling that this was an intricate series of short stories, I actually started to appreciate the book a lot more because each short story does have a more traditional story arc to it, and kind of made me really appreciate David Foster Wallace as a short story teller, because there are some chapters that you just get so wrapped up in, and you just feel so like you've been through this emotional roller coaster reading it. And then you finish and you're like, oh, this just doesn't even really have that much to do with the main story of the book, the main plot or narrative, but it just makes it really fun. And at the end, there is a I would say a fairly big payoff where a lot of these threads come together. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So there are just so many other books that are very complex in how they're written, but it's like the writing itself is complex, or there's a lot of time jumping and a non-linear narrative that makes it complex, or there's a lot that's told as like a fever dream or with surrealism that makes it complex. That there's none of that in here. The whole book stays pretty grounded. It feels very real and very visceral. It doesn't feel like a dream, or, well, there's some parts that do, but for the most part, it just feels like a real story about real people with some satire thrown in. But it's complex in its own unique way, where it's just this huge map that's almost like a play with different acts. And at the end, all of the acts now come together. Now, the last argument I will make about why this book is great is because this book is such a challenging book to read, because it will just take you an extremely long time, just due to how many freaking words are in this book, that there's not a huge amount of readers who have actually read Infinite Jest start to finish. Probably less and less so as far as modern readers go. Of course, it was a very popular book when it came out. It was a bestseller. It had a ton of hype. Lots of people read it in the 90s. But as we get further and further on, new people coming into the reading community, not as many people have read Infinite Jest. And so when you finish this book, not only will you have a tremendous sense of accomplishment, and it will make other books seem far less daunting because of just how big this is, but it will unlock conversations that you can have with a fairly select group of people that not everyone gets to participate in. And so it's kind of like a little bit of an exclusive club. And I know that that doesn't have anything to do with like the book itself. It's more about the community of reading around the book. So I don't know if we can necessarily chalk that up to making this book great, but it is a nice feather in your cap, a nice accomplishment, a nice key to unlock a door to a fairly exclusive club. And once you've read this book, I would say most people like it or love it. Of course, there's going to be people that loathed it, but it's such a long book that if you're not liking it, you're probably not going to get through it. So should you read it? That's really up for you to decide. If you like deeply human books, if you like books that tackle themes of addiction, if you like challenging books that are very dense with a lot going on, if you are patient, if you like funny books, but books that are also sad and funny at the same time, then you're the right reader for this. If you like beach reads, if you like more traditional narratives, if you like more traditional story arcs, if you like predominantly 19th century literature, maybe this book is not for you. But no matter what, if you do decide to attempt Infinite Jest, I will ask you to do these 3 things. Number 1, go into it with an open mind. Number 2, think of it as a series of interconnecting short stories. And number 3, budget much more time for this book than you think you're going to need. Don't tell yourself, I'm a fast reader and I can read 1 page in 30 seconds and therefore 1,200 pages is going to take me this much time. Don't do that to yourself. Budget 8 to maybe 12 weeks. Take a little bit of time every day to read this. Don't go too long in between your reading of it. You can read other books alongside. I encourage you to do that because sometimes it is nice to take a little bit of a break from it. But be patient and don't stray away from it for too long. And if you do read this book and you do finish it, let me know and let's have a conversation about it. And my last ask of you is, if you like this format, this what makes this book great, which is an idea I ripped off from Rick Beato, the Great Music Channel, let me know and I'll do more of them.